Will Graham Ike finally earn WCC Player of the Year honors, or will the conference ice out the Zags on their way to the Pac-12? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Folks, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to come get your profit boosts every game day. Well, folks, it is also WCC Wednesday today. And before we get into our preview of Washington State, Gonzaga's next opponent on Thursday, we will have that for you on Thursday's show. But today we're talking West Coast Conference Awards, making our first predictions for the season. We're a little more than halfway into the overall season, about a third of the way into the conference slate. So enough data to get a good idea of who's in the running for Conference Player of the Year, as well as Coach of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, etc., etc. We'll get you predictions for all 6 of the league's major awards in the first segment, and then we will talk about the all conference predictions in the second segment. Again, WCC does 10 full players for that first team. We'll talk about that. We'll also give you the all freshman team predictions, second team predictions, and some honorable mentions to close out the show. Lots to get to today. One of the big storylines in the WCC the last couple of years has been what sort of felt like the Zags getting iced out by the WCC. Now, Gonzaga did not win the West Coast Conference either of the last 2 years. So in some ways, there was some justification for why, for example, Graham Ike was not selected as WCC Player of the Year, despite very, very excellent performances in each of the past 2 years. The award instead went to Augustus Marcelonis, who, with no disrespect meant to Marcelonis, truly, probably, if you were to look at a list of the 2-time WCC Player of the Years, his name's going to stick out a little bit. It's certainly not among the more dominant players to be a part of that very prestigious club. And it felt like, especially to win those awards over Graham Ike, who was statistically more impressive than him for the most part, really in most ways. I get it. St. Mary's won. And in some ways, that's how the award goes. But it did feel like Gonzaga was getting kind of pushed out a little bit. And this is their last year. This is it. One more year in the West Coast Conference. So will they get showered with awards? Will they be completely left out, or as left out as they can reasonably be by the conference? That's kind of something we're going to be keeping an eye on. Does it ultimately matter? Not really. I mean, players want these accolades, and I'm sure coaches do too, but Gonzaga's going to focus first and foremost on winning the conference, which kind of leads me to my point of, I think that's going to be the difference maker. We'll start with Player of the Year. I am predicting that this is the year for Graham. That Graham gets it done, wins the WCC Player of the Year. And while I don't think we can't definitively say it's already a 2-man race, we're again only 5 games into the conference play, it kind of feels like it's a 2-man race. It's likely going to come down to either Graham Ike at Gonzaga or Paulius Murauskas at St. Mary's. And I think it might be determined by who wins the regular season. It's possible neither of these 2 teams lose except for to each other once. They split and finish 17-1 in the regular season. And in that case, I think I would lean Ike, but Murauskas is averaging more points per game at this point. Ike is averaging more rebounds. Their numbers are very similar. I do think that the fact that Braden Huff technically Ike is tied for second in the WCC in points per game with Huff. They're both averaging 17.8 points per game, and Murauskas is like 19.6. So I could see that almost splitting votes and taking away from Ike and having it go to Murauskas, but that's only if either St. Mary's wins the regular season or if Gonzaga, or if they split and each, go 17-1 in conference play. Ike, again, second in the WCC in points per game, tied with Huff. He is second in the WCC in rebounds per game behind St. Mary's center Andrew McKeever. He is second in the conference in field goal percentage, also behind Braden Huff. He is averaging a career high in assists per game. He's like 19th in the conference, which for a center is ridiculous that he's able to do that. Obviously, Huff is a strong candidate here as well. But Ike, again, same points per game. Ike is averaging nearly twice as many rebounds, twice as many assists. Huff is a more efficient scorer. That is the one thing he has a big advantage on, but Ike is really good at getting to the free throw line. He's also just Gonzaga's leader. You could really see that play out in that game against Santa Clara, where Ike scored 9 of Gonzaga's points, or the first 9 points for Gonzaga in the first 3 minutes of that game. He had 13 of their first 17 points. He put the team on his back when they needed him to, had a career high in a Gonzaga uniform of 34 points. He also leads the conference with 10 double-doubles. This is Ike's year. I'm predicting it. I'm calling it. But I do think Murauskas will be a strong candidate, particularly if St. Mary's once again wins the league. And that leads into the next conversation, which is Coach of the Year. It's been a while since Mark Few won Coach of the Year in the WCC. Randy Bennett has won it 4 years in a row. And it's funny, so much of the conversation around these awards is that there's fatigue around Gonzaga. They don't just want to give it to Mark Few every year. They don't want to just give it to Gonzaga's best player every year. Well, it's been nearly a half decade since Gonzaga won this award. In fact, they are quite literally giving it to Randy Bennett every single year. I'm not saying he's completely undeserving, but the argument that, oh, there's fatigue around Gonzaga falls flat when it's the same coach has won this award 4 years in a row. There can't be fatigue around one team when another team is just absolutely dominating this specific award. I think this is Coach Few's year again, and I'm very curious what happens if they split or if they tie for the regular season, or again, even if St. Mary's wins it by like one game. I'm wondering what will happen. Will they give it to Bennett again? Will he win it 5 years in a row? If Mark Few wins it, but only by a game, will they still give it to Coach Few? Will he get Coach of the Year in his final season in the West Coast Conference? Will they look elsewhere? It does feel like it should be a 2-coach race here, with apologies to Herb Sendek. His team is 5-1. They just obliterated LMU coming off of that loss to Gonzaga. He's a great coach, but it always feels like he's going to have a hard time actually winning this award if he doesn't finish higher than 3rd in the league. I think it's going to come down to Few and Bennett, just like it kind of always does in this conference, one final time before Gonzaga, of course, moves on to the Pac-12. I promise you, folks, I am not picking Gonzaga for every one of these awards, but I am picking them for half of these awards. There's 6 total awards we're talking about. This is our 3rd one. That's Newcomer of the Year. We are talking Tyon Grant Foster here for Newcomer of the Year. And I picked Tyon here because I couldn't really find another obvious candidate who fits what I think are the criteria here, which I wasn't going to pick. There are some freshmen who are great. We're going to talk about them for Freshman of the Year. And while a freshman could obviously win this award, it feels like the best freshman is going to win Freshman of the Year and the best transfers going to win Newcomer of the Year. That's not always the case, but that feels like the case here. And often awards like this aren't going to go to players on bad teams. So with apologies and respect to Tyler Johnson, who is the leading scorer among transfers new to the WCC this year, he's at San Diego, and I don't think they're going to give the Newcomer of the Year award to a player at San Diego. Rodney Brown is great at LMU. I don't think he's going to get it either. I think this award is very likely going to go to somebody at Gonzaga, St. Mary's, or maybe Santa Clara. And of the newcomers on those rosters, Grant Foster is the best. He is so versatile for Gonzaga and what he brings to this team, both offensively and defensively. He's averaging 12 points per game despite coming off the bench pretty much the majority of the season. He's averaging nearly 5 rebounds. He's leading the team with 1.3 blocks per game. He's shooting nearly 59% on 2-point attempts. His play has ticked up since conference play has began too. Again, we're talking full season numbers, but his numbers in conference play have been even better. He has scored like 17 or 18 points in 4 of their first 5 games. He's been really, really good since the calendar flipped over to conference play. And I think that, combined with the fact that there aren't any obvious newcomers at St. Mary's or at Santa Clara that are better than him. And I just don't think the award's going to go to somebody at, again, San Diego or LMU or San Francisco or any of those other programs that are outside the top 3 in this league. 3 more awards to talk about here. We're going to go through them kind of quickly. No Zags winning any of these, I'll tell you that right now. Freshman of the Year going to Joel Foxwell at the University of Portland. Everybody loves to talk about St. Mary's and their Australian pipeline. Shante Leggins has a great pipeline to Australia as well. Joel Foxwell comes over from the land down under, was expected to come off the bench for the Pilots this year, but has not only started, he has been one of the best freshmen in the country. He's been one of the best point guards in the country. Truly, there are 5 players in college basketball who are averaging over 14 points and over 7 assists per game. Foxwell is one of them. He leads the conference in assists per game at 7.2. He's averaging 14.5 points. He's averaging over 1 steal per game, 35% from 3. He has won the WCC Freshman of the Year award 5 different times. He is the obvious candidate for this award with respect to Ace Glass III at Washington State, who is actually the leading scorer among freshmen, averaging nearly 16 points per game. Foxwell is a more well-rounded player, has won more of the weekly awards, and I think will be the person who wins this award, with Glass being the honorable mention. Of course, we'll toss Mario St-Superi in that conversation as well. Defensive Player of the Year for the WCC. Strangely, not picking somebody from either St. Mary's or Gonzaga, both very good defensive teams this year. I'm going Will Heimbrodt at Seattle University. Heimbrodt is averaging 13 points, 5 boards, but he crucially 2.7 blocks per game, as well as 1 point steals. He is leading the WCC in total blocks and blocks per game by a lot. 46 blocks on the year and 2.7 blocks per game. Second place in both categories is ND Okafor at Washington State, who has just 30 blocks and 1.7 per game. So Heimbrodt is very clearly the best shot blocker in this conference, despite being 6'7". He's also averaging over 1 steal per game. His steals and blocks numbers combined are way better than anybody else in this league. The advanced metrics love him too. And Seattle U is a great defensive team. They're 50th in Ken Palm's adjusted defensive efficiency. They have held every single team they have played to 80 or to under 80 points, except for 2. One of them was Gonzaga, and it took the Zags overtime to get to 80 points, and they average over 90 a year or per game. And then St. Mary scored 93 against Seattle U. Those are the only 2 teams that have topped 80 points against Seattle U this year. Will Heimbrodt, phenomenal defensive player, very much deserving of this award, with respect to, of course, Jalen Worley, Grant Foster as well, Alan Graves at Santa Clara, Andrew McKeever, their 7'2" center for the Gales, Malik Arrington at Seattle U as well. And then speaking of Alan Graves, he is my 6th man of the year pick. And I'll put in the caveat here. I didn't want to give Grant Foster 2 different awards, so I wanted to split it here. If Grant Foster doesn't win Newcomer of the Year, and assuming he continues to come off the bench for Gonzaga, he is the very obvious candidate to win the 6th man of the year. But since I didn't want to give him 2, we're going to go with Alan Graves at Santa Clara. He's been great this year. He was the best player on the floor for the Broncos in that game against the Zags last week. He's averaging about 10 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 assists, and a block a game, doing all that in just 22 minutes per game. Coach Few specifically called him out after the game, which is not something Coach Few does very often. So you could tell he had a lot of respect for his game and his performance against the Zags in that one. Again, if you're not counting Grant Foster, I think it becomes a battle between Alan Graves. There's a few other players, Legend Smiley at San Francisco, which if there's an all-name team, we're putting Legend Smiley on it for sure, because that is an incredible name. Tenari Lane from San Diego has also been great. And of course, Jalen Worley going to be in this mix as well. Adam Miller, assuming he continues to come off the bench, which I know he started their most recent game, so I'm not sure what'll be the case there. And then Mario St-Superi, again, assuming he continues to come off the bench. The only one of those players who's likely to keep coming off the bench is Worley, and he will very much be in this conversation without a doubt. Well, the WCC gives out 10 spots for the all-conference first team. I'm going to give you my thoughts on who those 10 players might be and some thoughts on the all-freshman team as well, coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on that action every single day, because right now, every college football day or every day leading up to the college football playoff, FanDuel users can get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. Ride with the favorite when you think that team controls the matchup. Take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset coming, or build a parlay around the players and moments that you think will decide the game. Then you apply the profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. Gonzaga's odds remain at minus 650 to win the West Coast Conference one final time before moving into the Pac-12. Folks, FanDuel gives you the best place to get your action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. Continuing our conversation here, making our a bit too early, third of the way in to the West Coast Conference season. We're making our predictions for how the awards will shake out. We talked about all 6 of the major awards from the WCC in the first segment. Now we're going to take a look at my predictions for the all-conference first team. Again, the WCC likes to award 10 players for the all-WCC first team. So we're going to talk about my predictions for those 10. We're also going to talk about the 5-man all-freshman team and who might be on that list as well. So starting with the first team, again, we've seen this, how it plays out. Oftentimes, you're going to see players rewarded for being on the better teams. 8 of our 10 players on the first team are from the 3 top teams in the league, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and Santa Clara. And then 2 other players who statistically very much belong in this conversation, even if they're not on top 3 teams. We'll start with the Zags. It's not going to be much mystery here. Graham Ike, Braden Huff, and Tyon Grant Foster are your selections here. Graham Ike, obviously a strong candidate, if not the leading candidate, to be the conference player of the year. We've already talked about him. Braden Huff, of course, tied for second in the conference in scoring alongside Graham Ike, averaging nearly 18 points per game. The glow up that we expected from Braden Huff this year has completely happened. We knew that him stepping into the starting lineup would allow him to score more around the rim. We knew that his efficiency, as long as it didn't take a significant drop, would allow him to be a highly effective offensive player. And we have seen that come together. He has had some of the most incredible offensive performances of the entire college basketball season this year. Still, developing a little bit as a defensive player. The 3-point shot has been inconsistent. I think the rebounding could improve, but overall, from a scoring perspective, Braden Huff is one of the best in the entire sport, one of the most efficient in the country, and unquestionably belongs in this conversation. Third for this list here is Tyon Grant Foster. Grant Foster, again, his numbers have been even better since conference play has begun. He's averaging about 12 points, 5 rebounds per game for the Zags. Even if he's not starting, he is the 3rd best player for this Gonzaga team. He is at or near the top of the scouting report for opposing teams. His ability to get downhill, score at the rim, draw contact, and get to the line is tremendous. He's also a phenomenal defensive player. Gonzaga uses him at the top of their 3-quarter court trap. They use him. He's an effective defender on the perimeter. He is a really, really versatile and talented player for Gonzaga. And I think those 3 players are as close to locks as you can be. Certainly Ike and Huff are basically locked in. Grant Foster at this point is pretty close to being a lock for this first team as well. 3 players for the Gales of St. Mary's as well, starting with, of course, the other front runner for the Conference Player of the Year award. That would be Paulius Murauskas. Murauskas, similar to Graham Ike, is a walking double-double, averaging about 19.5 points per game, also averaging a ton of rebounds. Really, really good player, a focal point for them offensively. Struggles a bit defensively. Again, not too different from Ike and Huff in that regard, but a tremendous player and has taken on an even bigger role for this team following the departures of Marcelonis and Luke Barrett and Mitchell Saxon from last year's Gales team. Mikey Lewis, the only other key player from this last year's St. Mary's team that is back. Lewis, like Huff, was coming off the bench last year, stepped into a bigger role for this team. He's been a little inconsistent. Early in the year, he looked like was very likely going to be the WCC Player of the Year. He was playing tremendous. His performance has really dipped as of late. He has games where he doesn't score or barely scores at all for St. Mary's. He's just hasn't been super consistent as an offensive player. Still a dog defensively, still a clutch shot maker, a great 3-point shooter overall, just not quite as consistent as he looked like he was going to be in his sophomore season, but still very much in the conversation for this team. Again, I wouldn't say a lock, but certainly a very likely player to be on this team. And then third from the Gales is a newcomer for them, Joshua Dent. Joshua Dent averaging 13 points per game. He is their point guard as Lewis is playing more off the ball, which is a better fit for him. Dent, I think, is averaging about 5 assists per game as well. Good shooter, good scorer, just another the factory of talented, just high IQ guards for Randy Bennett and the Gales. I mean, they continue to churn these guys out year after year, and Dent is very much the next player on that list, having a really nice season for them. 2 players from Santa Clara give us 8 out of the 10 from those top 3 teams. They're the 2 leading scorers for the Broncos, Christian Hammond and Elijah Mahi. Neither of them had great games against Gonzaga, but both of them have been excellent this year. Hammond's averaging over 16 points per game. I think Mahi's around 14. Both tremendous 3-point scorers. Mahi also very good at getting downhill, getting to his spots and hitting little mid-range jumpers. Really gifted scorers, good shooters, good defensive players as well. Very much belong in this conversation again. I would caution anybody outside of Huff, Ike, and Murauskas probably aren't locks at this point, but Hammond and Mahi are both very likely to be in this conversation, and if not on this team when the season ends. And then we got two more players to talk about here. First, we're going to go with Elias Ralph from Pacific. He was a preseason pick for the All-WCC team and has done nothing to not earn that honor this year. Tremendous numbers, one of the best scorers in this conference, is a double-double machine, frequently putting up 20 and 10 caliber numbers. He followed Dave Smart over from the school that Smart coached in Canada prior to coming to Pacific. He first went to Texas Tech, and then he came over to Pacific, and he brought Ralph with him. Was a very much an unknown who immediately blossomed into a star player in this conference last year and has taken another leap this year as a scorer and rebounder on the wing. And then last but not least, from Seattle University, their star point guard, Braden Maldonado, was the leader in this conference in scoring heading into league play. His numbers have dipped a bit, scoring off against WCC competition, but he's still one of the better scorers in the conference. Seattle U has been a surprise if they continue to put up good numbers in this league. I think Maldonado will very likely be at least on the second team, but I have a good feeling he's going to be in that first team conversation as well. Looking at the freshman team for the WCC, I do have Mario St. Superi earning some hardware here as a member of the All-WCC freshman team. He would be behind the two candidates for the Freshman of the Year award, which would be Joel Foxwell from Portland and Ace Glass III from Washington State. Also, again, got to mention him again because the name is incredible. Legend Smiley is a key reserve for San Francisco, putting up really nice numbers for Coach Grolison and the Dons. He's going to be in this conversation as well. And then Sash Gavayulov, from Santa Clara, didn't have a great game against the Zags, but in the follow-up game against LMU, Gavagulov dropped 37. He is a redshirt transfer. I believe he transferred over from Villanova, so had some pedigree coming in. My understanding is that they do allow redshirt freshmen to be on the all-freshman team. If that is the case, I would expect Sash to be in this conversation from the Broncos. All right, folks, we're going to close out the show continuing this conversation. We're going to take a look at who's going to be on the All-WCC second team. Who did we leave off that first team? We're also going to give some honorable mention honors as well. All that coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still giving our predictions 1/3 of the way into the conference season on who is going to win the WCC's major awards in Gonzaga's final year, who's going to make the All-WCC first team and the freshman team. And now we're closing out the show talking about the 5 players we're projecting onto the All-WCC second team, as well as a handful of honorable mentions to talk about closing out the show. Looking at the second team, this is often in the history of the WCC, at least, where you see some of those really high performers from teams that maybe didn't do as well. This is often where those guys show up. So you'll see the guys who finish top 3, 5, 6 or so in scoring in the league often end up on the second team because they're on teams that just didn't really do all that well in league play. And so that's kind of, I tried to model my projections based off of how the league typically awards this. And that's kind of what I noticed. So that's what we're going with here on the second team. A couple of guys we've already talked about, including the 2 Freshman of the Year candidates, Ace Glass from Washington State and Joel Foxwell from Portland. Again, Foxwell averaging 14 points, 7 assists for the Pilots. Ace Glass, we'll talk more about him on Thursday's show as we preview that matchup against the Cougars in Pullman. But Glass has been a revelation for Coach David Riley and Washington State, one of the most prolific freshmen literally in all of college basketball from a scoring perspective. Doesn't do a ton else, and Wazoo has not been very good, although they have played better with conference play rolling around. If Wazoo picks up a few nice wins and finishes in a decent spot in the conference, I could absolutely see Glass competing for a spot on the first team, maybe taking a spot from either Maldonado or Ralph. But as it stands right now, I have him on the second team. And Foxwell, again, it would take a lot for him to make the first team just because Portland's not going to finish very high in this league. This is also where I have Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson, the one of the leading scorers in the conference, the leading scorer among direct transfers into the league, averaging about 14.5 points per game. Hit a tremendous game-winning buzzer beater 3 against in-city rival UC San Diego and future WCC rival for the Toreros. Tyler Johnson's a very gifted player, gifted scorer, and again, how many times have we seen players in this league, especially diminutive guards, 6'1" guards who can just score with anybody in the country, but don't do a ton else? It feels like the WCC collects those guys, and they so often earn conference honors for putting up 15, 16, 17 points per game. And that's kind of where I see Tyler Johnson finishing this year. Similar, although he's a more well-rounded player, is Ryan Beasley over at San Francisco. Ryan Beasley has been a tremendous player for a couple of years for the Dons. San Francisco loses Marcus Williams and Malik Thomas from last year's team. The expectation was that Beasley would kind of take that leap, and he has. He's a very productive, very talented player, but San Francisco just hasn't been as good as folks hoped that they would be this year. An injury to Mookie Cook has really hurt them. Tyrone Riley didn't take that sophomore leap that a lot of folks thought that he was going to, and some of the transfers have been good, but maybe not as great as advertised. So with the Dons kind of struggling, I wasn't sure I could find a spot for Beasley over Maldonado or Ralph on this top 10 team, but he certainly belongs in the conversation on the second team. And then last up is Oregon State wing and Tualatin High School native, which is where I went to school, Josiah Lake. Josiah Lake was the 7th best player on Oregon State's team last year, and then the 6 best players from that team all hit the transfer portal. So now Lake is the best player, and he is playing like it. 13 points a game, was one of the first winners for the WCC Player of the Week award back in November, has been very, very solid for Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers. I think he belongs in this conversation unquestionably. Some honorable mentions here to close out the show. We do have a couple Zags in this conversation. I mean, Gonzaga's team is so deep and so talented this year. I think you could make an argument for basically every rotation player that we haven't already talked about this year could be in this conversation. We've talked about, of course, Huff and Ike and Grant Foster. I think you can make an argument for pretty much anybody else. The 2 that I picked here are Braden Smith and Jalen Worley. Again, I think Smith and Mario St. Superi are both in this conversation. I picked Mario for the all-freshman team. I think he could be an honorable mention, maybe even a second teamer as well, depending how he does the rest of the year. But Smith right now is like 4th or 5th in the league in assists per game. And usually if you're one of the best passers in the conference, you're going to at least get honorable mention noms. So that's why Smith sits there right now. And then Jalen Worley is just so dang versatile. Statistically, he doesn't really pop off the page, mostly because he doesn't score the ball all that much. You don't see a ton of guys in the honorable mentions who are averaging like less than 7 points a game. But Worley is one of the best on-ball defenders in the conference, unquestionably. He is a phenomenal rebounder, one of the best offensive rebounders in the country. He's an efficient scorer when he does shoot shots, and he can facilitate and pass the ball. He doesn't get a ton of assists necessarily, but Gonzaga will put him on the floor in order to help break presses because he can bring the ball up as effectively a power forward on the floor. And I think that for coaches and people who watch him and see what kind of value he brings to Gonzaga, I think that will earn him some at least honorable mention nods, even if just scanning the box scores and scanning the statistics at the end of the year may not have him pop off the screen. Also going with Dylan Shaw at St. Mary's. Dylan Shaw has been very, very good for the Gales this year, kind of their fourth option for them. And Liam Campbell's in that conversation as well. I actually didn't put him on here, but let's pretend he's on this list because he's been very good for St. Mary's as well. And then a couple other guys from some of the not as high level teams in this league. Rodney Brown and MJ Amy for LMU. MJ Amy, I thought he was going to be my pick for 6th man of the year because he was LMU's 2nd leading scorer despite not starting for the Lions this year, but they have been starting him the last 5 or 6 games, I think. So now that he is a more regular starter for the team, I think he's not going to be 6th man of the year, but he's still one of the best scorers on one of the top half teams in the league. Same with Rodney Brown, both really good 3-point shooters, very, very gifted scorers. Again, 2 of the leading scorers for a team that's going to finish 5th, 6th or so in the conference. They're going to be at least honorable mentions. And then I already talked about him earlier, but Will Heimbrodt, again, 13 points a game, second leading scorer for Seattle U, leading shot blocker in the conference, versatile, gifted offensive and defensive player. If you win Defensive Player of the Year, you're probably at least going to be an honorable mention. So I got to throw his name in here as well. Styles Phipps from Pepperdine, the only mention of Pepperdine on this list. He is 2nd in the WCC in assists per game, a well-rounded player who scores, who rebounds, and who distributes the ball efficiently. So he's going to be in the conversation, even though the Waves are not very good. And then TJ Wainwright, transfer from Long Beach State, averaging over 13 points per game for Coach Smart at Pacific. Another one of the better scorers in this league who's not getting a ton of buzz because Pacific's, they've been fine. They actually had a pretty good non-conference, and maybe they'll have a little bit more representation than I'm giving them here as part of this conversation. But I didn't see any other very obvious candidates from them. Isaac Jack, their big man, transfer from Dayton. He's been good, but not great for the Tigers. But Wainwright's definitely a guy that I think will be in this conversation. All right, folks, we'll see how I did. We'll probably have another conversation about this later as the season rounds up towards the end of February. But for now, this is my predictions set in stone for the WCC Awards. Again, that's going to wrap it up for me today, folks. But on Thursday's show, we're going to have a full-on preview getting you ready for that night's game in Pullman against the Cougars of Washington State. So look out for that in your feed on Thursday mornings. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.